One Goal is incredibly lucky to have these amazing people working here and alongside us. So I have three folks rather that I'm going to introduce. Please help me in welcoming Justin Browning. Justin works at Barron County Schools in Kentucky and serves as the Innovation and Career and Technical Education Coordinator. Dr. John Baumgarten is a post-secondary leadership coach with One Goal, based in Chicago. And Dr. Rachel Martin is a Senior Director of Program Learning, also with One Goal, based in St. Louis. I am really excited about the opportunity to learn alongside these brilliant folks who have agreed to share their time and their knowledge with all of us, and who I got to co-author this really great research brief about that we are going to share with you today. So we're going to talk about the impact that professional development has for educational leaders and how that impacts students' opportunities and post-secondary outcomes. Before we jump into our discussion today, I also want to start with a quick overview of One Goal. So I need your help to tee that up a little bit. We're going to launch another poll, and we want to get a gut check from you. How much time do you think a public school student typically receives from their school counselors to think about post-secondary admissions advice and other items? So you have four options: less than 30 minutes, 30 to 60 minutes, 1 to 2 hours, more than 2 hours. How much time is how much time is a high school student receiving from their school counselor for advising? All right, let's show the results. Here's where folks showed up, just so you can see what the room looked like. And now let's do the big reveal. On average, public school students receive only 38 minutes of college admission advice from their school counselors. And so we know that's not enough time. And this brief this brief amount of time is insufficient for any young person to navigate complex and challenging processes about their future, especially when students come from underserved or under-resourced communities or historically marginalized in the process. So it's clear to us at One Goal that students need so much more to successfully manage their post-secondary journey. And so with that, One Goal's vision is that every student will have equitable opportunity to achieve their greatest post-secondary aspiration. And that's where we've really put our mark and we're settling into. This is so important because given that only 22% of students from low-income communities earn a post-secondary degree, compared to 67% of their peers from high-income areas, we really care about that disparity and we want to close that gap. So our mission is to lead the movement to transform post-secondary advising and support. And we do this through a variety of ways. We work through communities across the country primarily through two types of partnerships. First, our direct impact model is in a daily class for high school students, juniors and seniors specifically, with an extra year of support during the transition to post-secondary. So just like math or English are taught during the school day, we believe post-secondary planning must be taught with equal rigor and that teachers and school can be supported to effectively deliver this knowledge. And second, our One Goal Leadership Network provides expert coaching and a community of learning for school and district leaders, which is going to be a space that we talk about more today. We help them build and strengthen the systems and structures that will lead to increased post-secondary outcomes and close equity gaps for students. So this year, we'll reach over 87,000 students indirectly through One Goal Leadership Network, and we will have 275 district and school leaders that are participating in One Goal Leadership Network across 57 partners and 7 states, which is really, really exciting. You can learn more about One Goal by visiting our website when you find a moment, and you'll have that website will be dropped in the chat for you. So now that you know a little bit more about One Goal, we really want you to think about how you can engage in the chat. So given your experience, please use the chat box to share. Does your district or school or wherever you sit in the K-12 ecosystem currently invest in leadership development, specifically about post-secondary systems, structures, and outcomes? Go ahead, write in the chat, let us know. Are you investing in post-secondary leadership development for school or district leaders? and you can engage with the chat throughout. And hopefully this conversation will really pique and drive some new opportunities and thought partnership for you to think about too. And so the idea of investing in leaders really resonates with us and is the center of this research brief. And so we really want to see districts across states and across areas investing in professional development for their leaders because we know it matters. And after this webinar, we hope that you'll have some strategies, some resources, some ideas about how you could do that. So with that, I'm going to invite Dr. Rachel Martin, Senior Director of Program Learning at One Goal, to share the beginning of our research brief with you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. Like Kayla said, I'm going to share a little bit about our research brief, which I'm sure we can drop the link in the chat so you can explore that when we're finished with this webinar. But where we want to start is with the power of school leaders to make transformation in their communities. And the research on this is actually quite clear. School leaders have a huge influence on the success of their students, including they play a critical role in driving academic improvement. I'm sure we can all think about the ways in which school leaders show up to help develop the academic plans for their community, make sure their teachers have the resources that they need to deliver high quality academics. Leaders also play a significant role in fostering school culture, in school climate, in making sure that students have a safe and caring environment in which they come to school to learn. School leaders play a significant role in college and career readiness, which we'll talk about a little bit more on the next slide. And of course, they play a huge role in advancing equitable opportunities for students. But when we go to the next slide, we can see specifically the role that school leaders play in promoting post-secondary readiness. School leaders play, specifically, they start by helping their communities build a shared vision for what post-secondary readiness and success looks like for their students. Then they help develop the strategies that are necessary to see that vision to fruition. A lot of the times, this means leading the way for additional career pathways, for bringing advanced coursework into their schools, and for making sure that students have access to opportunities both within the school and outside of the school to develop their career interests, to prepare for their post-secondary plans. Leaders make sure that there are partnerships between their schools and external organizations, such as community colleges or different trades, different things going on in the community, the workforce pathways that are available in their community. Leaders also create structures for collaboration and leadership development. They are the ones who, again, are building the vision and making sure that there's a plan for execution of that vision. They're also playing a role in developing teachers' leadership capacity, not only in the academic space to make sure that teachers have what they need to help promote academic readiness, but also to ensure that teachers are capable of supporting in the post-secondary vision for their students. If we go to the next slide, we can see a really powerful quote from a piece of research that came out several years ago now that stated, "The research evidence is overwhelming. Quality principals result in quality schools that produce higher student performance, but the opposite is also true. Poorly prepared principals lead schools nowhere." And this is a problem when, as we go to the next slide, we can see that a very small number of principals report that they have access to professional development, to things like on-the-job mentoring or coaching, specifically related to being a principal and leading a school community. Almost half of principals say that they don't have regular access to a peer network where they can develop strategies, develop their own community of principal peers to make sure that they are developing in their own roles. We know that teachers get a lot of development, professional development, as they should, to make sure that they're well prepared to deliver the academic standards that we want all of our students to have. But along the way, we do sometimes neglect what principals and school leaders might need in terms of their own professional development. If we go to the next slide, what we know for a fact is that in education, there is never enough money, and we rarely agree on how it should be spent. the funding that we have, the limited funding that we have, is often directed at direct resources that impact students or professional development for teachers. But in our research brief, we are arguing that investing in school leaders can be a very powerful tool for transformation of communities. Given all of the research that shows that school leaders have such a terrific impact on what happens to their students, both when they're in school and after they graduate, as they embark on their post-secondary pathways. The last thing that we do in our research brief is outline a framework for high-quality leadership development. And as you can see here, we believe that the framework for high-quality leadership development starts with strengthening the capacity of school leaders. This is the bottom tier of our framework, what we think is foundational. And this, what we're alluding to here, is the idea that school leaders should be able to develop their knowledge, their skills, and their abilities related to the area that they want to improve in their schools. Maybe in our case, we're specifically talking about post-secondary readiness, that the first thing leaders have to do is develop these knowledge, skills, and abilities. The second thing that they have to do is build their efficacy to implement these knowledge and skills. We know that gaining knowledge is great, is critical, but actually feeling confident enough to implement the knowledge, the skills, the strategies that you've learned about takes additional development. And lastly, we talk about enacting will among the communities. Leaders can come in, gain these knowledge and skills, build their confidence to implement improvement efforts. But the last thing that they have to do is really tap into their internal motivation to do this work when it's really hard and there might be failure along the way, and also to inspire motivation among their school communities, because we know that transformation can't happen when only one person is at the helm. We have to bring people along with us. So we imagine that this framework can be helpful for communities to use when thinking about what types of leadership development to bring in, how to engage school leaders in this type of leadership development to ensure that leaders aren't only, again, gaining the knowledge and skills that they need, but also feeling confident to implement these strategies and bring folks along with them so that we can really engage in true transformation. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it back to Kayla.
Thank you so much for that really quick overview of the research brief. If you have questions that have come up in that process, please feel free to drop them into the chat. And now I'm going to welcome Dr. John Baumgarten, post-secondary leadership coach at One Goal, to share with us how One Goal Leadership Network, a professional development tool that helps to assess your district's readiness and define a path forward for high impact improvement, aligns to this particular framework. So John, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Kayla. Hi, everybody. Great to be with you for the afternoon. I'm excited to talk to you and share about our One Goal Leadership Network. So this is one of our 2 program solutions that Kayla alluded to earlier at the start of the webinar. But we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this one and kind of actually look at how the framework then shapes our professional learning and kind of this multi-year partnership approach. If you look at the next slide, we're going to see that in short, right, our leadership network is this multi-year partnership where really we're helping districts transform their post-secondary outcomes through the help of experts and peers and kind of getting real-time access to coaching and community practice. So this is the work that Kayla and myself get to do and execute on a daily basis. And we're going to kind of actually see it in practice later on after this webinar, or sorry, during this webinar, when we hear Justin talk about his experience with the One Goal Leadership Network. On the next slide, you'll see that big picture, this is kind of what we, how the model works, right? So when we start off with a partner, whether that's going to be a smaller district partner or a larger district partner, we actually begin with a baseline post-secondary readiness assessment. This is one of our core tools that we use that's aligned to our 7 rubric areas, where we actually see what is the current state of your district or your school on this post-secondary kind of readiness journey. Every partnership starts with this. We believe that actually if we're going to create a coaching plan and kind of work with you, we need to have a really accurate baseline of where your experience is. So this kind of grounds it in the into the community's perspective of what they believe to be true about their current district. After we get into this readiness assessment, we then actually start to create a kind of a custom tailored coaching plan. So we use the baseline to figure out where are we at, and then start to kind of like look at where do we want to go? What does the future look like? What does a successful 2-3 year partnership look like, where we can actually say, this is the future vision, the future state of where we want to be. and then kind of map a route to get there. After the coaching plan starts to get developed, we then engage in the one-on-one coaching. So myself, Kayla, individuals like us on our team, we are assigned to districts where we get to actually work in regular time, several hours a month together to actually achieve those coaching visions and those coaching plans. Along the way, we're also engaging in regularly networked communities of practice. And so myself and Kayla are facilitators across the country in different areas where we bring together those communities. So oftentimes in models, you can feel like you're isolated, right? And actually one of our big core tenets is that like we actually want to bring people together, because the more districts that we bring together who are working on this post-secondary readiness journey, the more often we can share those insights. And we know that to be true, right? Is that even depending on if it's going to be a small district, a medium-sized district, or a larger district, there are going to be similar challenges that each district is facing. And so through increased conversation, through things like consultancy protocols and kind of actual network tracks of learning, we can kind of help a district move along that journey a little bit faster. At the end of the day, we expect that by the end of 3 years, we should see some system level benefits. Those things could be anything from a shared vision and plan to kind of resource talent optimization. We always ground it in real-time data, both of current students and looking also at the success of alumni students. And then, other things might be like post-secondary structures built into the day, right? Increasement on kind of equitable student enrollment, post-secondary acceleration courses, lots of different things. Naming that, again, each district and what they want to work on is going to be unique. And so that's why it's not going to necessarily be like we promise A, B, and C, but rather there's actually a variety of suites of tools and areas that districts may want to improve upon. If you look at the next slide, you'll actually see how we start to measure and look at success at this. This should feel really similar to what Rachel just talked about. And so the beginning of the partnership, it's all about acquiring new skills and knowledge to advance post-secondary readiness. But through that knowledge acquisition, then actually we start to look at how do we kind of change and move the trajectory of a district, right? So increasing the day-to-day kind of structures and adjusting those, working with, again, the coaches. A big part of this is also the post-secondary culture. One of our tools that we use is a post-secondary culture survey tool that we actually get to work with on the student-facing side and adults. And we know that like the culture of a school and of a district is super important. And so we pay really close attention to that part of our data, again, to kind of drive improvement on the back end. The last thing that I'll say before we kind of come back big picture in here, Justin's experience with the One Goal Leadership Network is that we are always grounded ourselves in data. And so one of the key things that in the coaching plan, districts are actually picking kind of a post-secondary readiness learning indicator that we expect to move for current students. That can vary based, again, on district by district, and we'll talk about that. Justin may be able to highlight that for what his experiences have looked like. But also that we know that enrollment and kind of persistence of alumni is super important as well. So by the end of the partnership, right, you'll start to see that this kind of trajectory of experiences from knowledge to actual kind of day-to-day structures, improvement of the culture, and then also really attentiveness to the success of current students and alumni students is what we measure success at the end of the 3-year partnership. If we look at the next slide, I think actually we'll be kind of going back to a whole panel discussion here, or sorry, not a whole panel discussion, but actually starting to think about Justin's experience and seeing what that journey has looked like. And so I'll pass it back to Kayla, and then we'll transition forward.
Thanks so much, John. Really appreciate that. Before we dive into Justin's experience in our panel discussion, we're going to launch one final poll of our time. We'll take about 30 seconds. You'll see this come up. And while we do that poll, Justin is going to come on camera and we'll be welcoming him back too. Amazing. There's the poll. Just take just a second to participate, please. Great. So where we're headed after the poll is we are going to introduce Justin and his experience, and then we're going to have a panel discussion about what this means in practice. So often research can live in ivory towers where we don't use as practical applications. And so we think it's really important that we talk about the practical applications of all of this. and that we ground this in some experience that real district leaders are having and using on a regular basis. So our next slide is going to introduce Barron County. And Justin, I will invite you to introduce yourself briefly. And then if you want to just introduce the context that you come from with Barron County Schools, that would be amazing.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Browning. I am a coordinator for innovation and anything related career and technical education for Barron County Schools. We're located in South Central Kentucky. We are a somewhat middle of the road Kentucky-sized school district. So we have 10 schools in district, 1 high school, 1 middle school, a total of 5,000 students. And we, like many other places in Kentucky and rural America, are impacted on a daily basis as it relates to not just post-secondary readiness, but what post-secondary readiness points to. So my background, I've spent time in the classroom, I've spent time as a building administrator, I've spent time in district central office jobs, and bringing that to the table and my relationship and our relationship and growth with one goal is why I was invited here.
Amazing. Thanks, Justin. I really appreciate it. So at this point, we're going to invite all of our presenters to come on camera, and we're going to have a panel discussion for the next, 25 minutes or so. If you have questions that come up through this process, please let us know. If it's for everyone, we can do that. But if you have a directed question for someone on the panel, please feel free to direct that question, and we can make sure we create time and space for that. Justin, I would love to start with you as the expert with the district experience here. Can you just tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a K-12 leader that you are today?
Absolutely. I'll try to do it as briefly as possible. When I get all philosophical, I go everywhere. So, I love what I do. And knowing and understanding that if I did not love what I do, I would not do it. I would be doing something else, and I would be doing it somewhere else in some other capacity. But my goal, being a lifelong resident of Barron County and having been really all across the world in different capacities, my current goal is I want to do the absolute best work I can to better this county, to better our local economy, to provide opportunity upon opportunity for the students and the families that live here. We're drastically impacted by a lot of economic change, as a lot of rural Americans are. And inside of that change, we have to mold and we have to adapt. And honestly, post-secondary readiness plays a huge role in how we're addressing those local and economic needs and how we best prepare our students. So that's really my why. What I do is I'm trying to point to community engagement, community involvement, and long-term sustainable community success. And I do that through addressing the needs that we have here in our context in Barron County.
Yeah, I love that so much. I love your commitment to your community. I think that probably resonates with educators that are on the call today, and many educators that we've all had the opportunity to network with. I'm curious, as someone who's been really involved in bridging the education and workforce development sides, how do you see school leadership influencing students' preparedness for the evolving workforce?
Honestly, I've served in the role that I served in, even though the title may have changed since 2017. And what I found out in the 2017, 2018, having all of my professional experience essentially being in the field of education, is I did not know what I didn't know. And if I was going to play a role in developing these students to where they could be contributing members of our local economy and in society itself, then I had to learn everything I could about how to make that happen, which means I had to be involved not just at the local level, but really at the national level. And because of the way globalization is now, I mean, we can be anywhere we want to be within 24 hours, right? We can work remotely for any company in any country. Just due to the nature of that, then I needed to not only know everything I can know about local workforce and economy and how we address that as educators at the local level, but I had to expand my knowledge base to where it would say, okay, this is what the market is. This is what we say is going to happen in the next 3 years. This is what we say is going to happen in the next 5 years. And we have to look long-term all the way 10 years out. A lot of that research and work that I did and study, it was just digging deep and going down a lot of different rabbit holes on my own late at night. I used a lot of the work from a lot of different groups that were bringing out a ton of data about what the future workforce and the future economy looks like. But so I was intrinsically motivated to increase my own capacity. And then really going into that, I had the why. I had the why. So I'm increasing my capacity. I have the why. And then it was about me bringing along as many people as I can that were in our district, but also understanding that I use the phrase a lot. I was carried to the table. There were leaders inside of my school district that really challenged me to think differently, to think in this capacity, in this way. So a former superintendent here at Barron County Schools was way out of the box in his thinking. And then I had a school leader that I worked underneath, actually two school leaders that I worked underneath that are now the superintendent and the associate superintendent and serve in that capacity. Then we're still working closely together. So I was carried to the table, and I constantly had around me people that were challenging the status quo in education, and as it relates to how are we meeting needs of students and preparing them for success in this new emerging post-secondary market and this continually emerging market.
Yeah, I love that so much. Thank you. John, it really has me thinking about how we make sense of this across different areas. So you've worked in a lot of different governance structures and educational systems. And I'm curious, what are some of the common themes that you see when it comes to leadership development gaps that especially affect post-secondary outcomes?
Yeah, thanks, Kayla. I think the one big theme is that things are always changing. And so, for example, I get to work across state portfolios of Illinois and Massachusetts. And Illinois, as of 2017, when they changed their ESSA plan to have a new composite state core, metric, like the CCRI, College and Career Readiness Indicator. In 7 years, that has had a significant impact on what leaders had to be ready for, how they'd be viewed as successful, what would be look like on the accountability structure. And so if we aren't spending time to intentionally develop our leaders, train leaders, kind of upskill them in areas like this with kind of ESSA's CCRI in Illinois, then we're going to not be successful from our schools from an accountability structure. And I think like when you look at that in practice, every district in the state's accountable to it. So whether you're a rural district, whether you're kind of a large urban complex district, you still have to kind of be successful in that. So, things are rapidly changing. Massachusetts has had a big push recently with the early college plan and that kind of post-secondary readiness success. Again, if you're not staying up to date and kind of being proximate to legislation, and also what does that mean from an impact of your day-to-day leader, then you're probably not going to be successful as a school leader moving forward from any of these kind of complex data accountability structures. And I think that the big part is, again, we have more in common than we think we do. So everyone is trying to really be thoughtful about how do you actually create better conditions and systems for kids that will then allow you to be successful and also kind of move the work forward.
Yeah. Thanks, John. It has me thinking about, as you said, so many of our states are moving to accountability systems that include some measurement for students of post-secondary readiness, whether it's CCRI in Illinois or PSR in Kentucky, or they're called different things across other states. And that is a measurement focused on students. Rachel, as our measurement expert here, I'm wondering, how do you measure success when it comes to post-secondary leadership development and the impact on those student outcomes in particular?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question, Kayla, because this is what I spend all of my days thinking about. And it is challenging because school leaders are in charge of very complex systems that lead to student outcomes. So I think to start, I think that the measurement begins far before we're ever trying to actually understand what's happening. And I think we need a strong theory of change about what we want to see happen. So when we're thinking about leadership development that's targeted towards building specific knowledge and skills, mindsets, and confidence among leaders, it's getting really clear about what are we going to do? How are we going to understand if what we wanted to do actually occurred? And then what are the outcomes that we expect to see as a result of what we're putting in place? So having that hypothesis of what we want to see so that we can measure something accurately, I think is really important. When it comes to measuring specifically post-secondary leadership development, I am trying to think of it really as an exercise in triangulation, in understanding whether or not developing leaders results in change for the leaders themselves, change for the other adults that they interact with in their system, so teachers, counselors, other administrators, and then lastly, what that development and impact has on students. So a lot of the accountability measures, Kayla, that you were talking about are delayed metrics. Like, we won't know these things for a while, sometimes for years, right? If we want to think about potentially post-secondary enrollment, persistence, completion, it could be 6 to 8 years before we could understand whether or not a leadership development program has had an impact on student outcomes. We should certainly do that. We should certainly invest in understanding those long-term impacts. But along the way, I think we can get a really good sense of whether or not the system and the culture is changing within schools by asking students and adults those questions themselves. So we are really trying to create a measurement system here at One Goal where we're elevating the voices of students and practitioners in their own experiences to share with us how the development of the leaders of their systems might be impacting their cultural change. So we're in the process of developing 2 quantitative surveying instruments called the Student and Adult Post-Secondary Culture Surveys. For example, we're just really trying to elevate the perspectives and the voices of students and adults themselves, because that is reflective of how their leaders are engaging in development efforts and indicative of whether or not those development efforts are having the intended impact according to our hypothesis. So it was a very complex answer, but it's a complex question when we're trying to think about how to measure change in these really complicated systems that involve a lot of different people and a lot of different layers.
Yes, absolutely. Right. I mean, so there are so many leading indicators and lagging indicators and long-term goals and accountability systems. And what you've said is like, that's all great. And how do we lean on voice, the voice of the educator, the voice of the student, to really understand that? It happens that Justin is one of those voices we could lean on. So Justin, I'm curious, how has your experience with One Goal's leadership network impacted the way that Barron County approaches post-secondary advising and readiness for students?
Oh my goodness. I have articulated multiple times that in our post-secondary readiness journey here in Barron County that there were a couple years that, even though, like I said, I was carried to the table, I had the support of the leaders that were behind me, I still felt as though I was on an island. Okay, so I'm on an island. I'm learning this from ground up. I had enough knowledge of what's going on in the technology world, what is happening in innovation and education, what's happening in innovation overall. And I began building networks. And those networks I build a relationship with a company in Boston, and they fly down and they say, hey, I'm going to pick you up in Bowling Green. We're going to fly down to Naples. I need you to talk to me about this. In particular. So, building those type of networks, but I still felt like I was on an island because even though I was in this marketplace space, I really wasn't in a good place in the education side of that. So One Goal really became a partner, and there's all kinds of different partnerships. Thought partnership is my favorite. I want people to get in the room with me with a whiteboard and let's see a problem and let's find a solution. One solution that's practical, that's has goals that are attainable, that we can try. And if we try it and it fails, then we're like, hey, let's try something else next time. And I feel like One Goal's really been instrumental in that process, and they're still instrumental in that process. Kayla's been a great help to us and continues to be a great help to us as we look at our 9th grade on track, as we're moving forward to something that we're just not going to do in 9th grade, but we're going to carry on. The goal is to carry on throughout years, maybe even beyond graduation. So that the network that One Goal has provided to us in our relationship, it's been instrumental in our growth, and we're still growing. We've not arrived. Don't think we ever will.
I mean, it's all a learner's mindset, right? Like, how do we continue to improve and continuously improve? But you can't do it alone. You say you've been carried to the table with a lot of support. You've also mentioned just intrinsic motivation for leaders and for teachers is really important. How are you thinking, Justin, about how you bring people along on this journey as one of the innovators kind of leading the way?
It really depends on who you're trying to bring along with you, doesn't it? And that goes with just about anything. So some folks there can be a battle cry, right? And it's reading the people and knowing the room. So some folks you can give a battle cry. It's odds are stacked against us. Odds are stacked against our kids. Let's go. Let's fight. Let's battle. Let's do it for them. Some you can plea to the emotional side. So it's like we love these kids. Let's empathize. Let's sympathize. Let's see where they come from. Let's move them forward. Some of them are analytical to the point where if you just show them the data, they're going to come alongside and go. They're like, yeah, the data's clear. Let's do it. Let's rock. We see that. So it's really knowing your audience and how we're going to bring them along in this. But the capacity building, so how are they going to be motivated for them to invest as well as us invest in building their own capacity? You've just got to know the individual. You've got to have the relationship with them.
Yeah, I mean, that's critical, right? Differentiated communication and how we think about those things. John, you have, again, really helped districts think about that differentiated communication and how they think through different messaging and things. I'm wondering, how do you think about, or how do you build leadership teams that can drive collective improvement across diverse districts with various levels of resource and various levels of intrinsic motivation?
Yeah, thanks, Kayla. I think the thing that I would ground us in first and foremost is that no district is going to have like a set like blueprint for the next, right? And so we have to really be really thoughtful about how, when we do our landscape analysis at the beginning of a partnership, that we're actually really kind of like stirring up like what is the foundation, what we currently have, how siloed is this post-secondary journey, where does it live? Is it living in guidance? Is it living in counseling? Is it living in the CTE? And a lot of times those spaces can be really fractured, probably not by design or intention, but just kind of by like the reality of the practice of what that looks like. And so when we kind of start our partnership with a district, we are really thoughtfully trying to get as much information as we can to then make sure that we have the right people that we bring to the table, to then kind of get everybody on the same space. And a lot of that begins with like, again, what's the shared vision of what we're working towards, that post-secondary vision, and being really clear on the different roles that each of us play as experts in the room. We'll also recognize that if we actually don't kind of like bring all this together as a kind of a collective model, that things will probably start to go back to like falling through the cracks. And so it takes a lot of time of being intentional with like building, I think as Justin said, a partnership with a district that doesn't necessarily say like, hey, here's kind of the playbook approach we're going to do, but really being intentional in the beginning of understanding what the partner needs, what the partner wants, and then kind of creating that coaching plan that works to successfully work towards that vision. The other thing that I just would name is because districts are very differently resourced, as we talked about in our brief, and as we know to be true, if anyone's in the K-12 space, that we just can't have any assumptions about like, what that looks like. Sometimes schools can't afford roles. They have to maybe kind of like split the role across multiple schools. And that's okay, right? We can't go into this like with the mindset of, well, if they don't have like X amount of counselors, or if they don't have like a CTE director. So really, again, it's about being kind of a collaborative partner, recognizing what each district has, and then collectively working together. Sometimes getting, like working hard to get the right people at the table through lots of over communication and emails, and kind of creating a team that will then be able to unlock the outcomes that we want and know to be true for students on the back end.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, with that, what I want us to pivot towards, and we're going to want to remind folks, our attendees, that if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. We'd love to hear them and make sure that we privilege them with the time we have remaining. But we're going to have a couple questions for everyone on the panel, and maybe some cross dialogue too. What we hope to be true for folks walking out of this is that you have some kind of practical idea you can take away. And so let's pivot a little bit from that into the practicality piece. And so my first question for everyone is, overburdening staff burnout, leadership burnout is a huge potential problem that we think about in education spaces. And so I'm wondering how any of you might think about how schools can build the capacity of their leaders to close equity gaps like the ones we've mentioned, without overburdening staff. How do you do this well without making everyone feel like they're doing just another thing?
I'll say something real quick because I think it's something that I say with my districts all the time is that if you feel like we are another thing, then we are not the right, like, we're not like the right partnership at the time because like actually the work is already happening. And I think a lot of our work is about actually creating coherence across that. And so we don't want to create any of these things where it is another meeting, another thing that doesn't necessarily drive outcomes for kids. But coherence is huge. And so if we can't embed ourselves into your district, strategic vision or plan, then we're not doing our job as a responsive partner to what needs to be advanced. And so I think that's like a big part that I say with all of our districts is that like, look, it shouldn't feel like another thing. This should feel like the thing because it's actually what you want to achieve in advance. And it's already set in your vision. We're just bringing the partners together to, I think, make it happen in a more coherent fashion.
I would add to that based on my own experience, burnout's not a thing when I do what I love so much. I was carried to the table, but also even prior to that, I was somewhat of a champion in this space. They identified that, they saw that, they targeted that, and they brought me alongside to continue that work. So is it cool that I'm in a school and I create my own job description? Absolutely. But the results are clear. The data speaks volumes. Our teachers are increasing capacity. Our new administrators are increasing capacity. And our post-secondary readiness scores, if you just want to use that metric, they're clear. What we're doing is working. Now, if we can just get to the metric of how do we know it's working 10 years from now, that'd be great. So if you all figure that out, just let me know.
Next research brief. Just kidding. I don't want to promise that. But yeah, no, that's the golden sauce, right? Yeah. Rachel, I saw you come off mute. You should definitely jump in.
Yeah. I am a motivation researcher by training. So I really think about this from the mindset of like, how do we motivate people? We think about how to motivate students all the time in through academic challenges, for example. But we probably spend a little bit less time thinking about how to motivate adults in our systems. And a couple things are really coming to mind for me based on what Justin and Johnny were saying. The first is like, people need to know the utility of what they're doing. Like, what is the utility value? What are we working towards? What do we want to actually see? If they feel like Justin, you were saying, like, you don't feel burnout when you're super engaged and believe in what you're doing or love what you're doing. There is that like intrinsic motivation. Are we working towards something collectively together? And do we know what we're working towards? Can we envision it? Can we measure along the way whether or not we're getting there or not getting there? So that's one thing. And then I think really also tapping into the emotional value. Like you're saying, most people who became educators love kids and really want to see kids be successful. And sometimes when we do get like really caught up in the day-to-day challenges of being in education, I do think it can be easy to forget why we're actually here. So maybe this is naive, but thinking about how we can motivate folks by tapping into that internal like original motivation for going into this work, which most of us discovered in our post-secondary lives. Like not many of us probably thought in high school that we wanted to become educators. So what were our own post-secondary journeys? What did they look like? How did they inspire us to go into this work? And how do we want to kind of like bring that to our students? But I think tapping into those types of motivational factors might help us bring some folks along and not feel like it's just another thing or feel like it's burdensome. It can be something tangible that people can see that they can be successful at.
Yeah, it has me really thinking about then how do you tap into that for the collective impact piece, like the collective leadership, many hands make light work kind of thing. And so I wonder if any of the three of you have examples of how collective leadership, maybe it's been like a post-secondary leadership team, like a PLT, but any form of collective leadership has meant and led to meaningful change in student post-secondary outcomes in your professional experience.
We are still on that road. So, Kayla, you were with us last year, right? So you're with us last year, and last year we're like, how can we bring more people on board to impact student achievement through our built-in advisory groups across the course of the high school day. And inside of those advisory groups, let's not just do preparing for a test, but let's do preparing for life, preparing for post-secondary, preparing to gain credentials. Okay, how do we do that? Well, year one was really on me and a couple other team members that were at the district level, to where we're going to build out this source of information and data and teaching and distribute that to our teachers. That was great. That was good initial. We modeled it. Year two, which is this year, is now we built teams. So now the teams are building out those advisory lessons, and they're distributing those. That teams consist of grade level administrators, grade level counselors, and grade level teachers. So now teams are doing it. Hopefully we get to the point where the next phase is it becomes so much of our biology that you're building that internally. Teachers are building their own understanding what they've learned in the past 2 years and the growth that we've seen. So.
Yeah, thank you for that example.
I'll shout out one of my districts that I get to work with, because I've been able to work with them for a couple of years now. And I want to be very clear that, like, I'm not claiming their success is a direct result of like my work. I want to be very, very clear about that, because they've been doing good work. But a district that I work with in Southwest Illinois, just in the St. Louis metro area, they over the past, I think it's like 2.5 to 3 years, have moved their freshman on track rate close to 30 percentage points. And so when they started back with them in like 2021, and again, lots of stuff disrupted by pandemic. And so like, again, I want to name that there's like some anomalies there. But their freshman track was like the mid 50s. And as of this past year, they were in the, I think, 86%. And so I think about like movement of student outcomes and really naming the inclusiveness of like how a team was doing that and bringing these things to attention, right? Like a lot of our work is like trying to highlight evidence-based research. We know freshman track is a game changer. And so how do we attend really specifically to that, really intensively to that, build a team that's going to be doing a lot of continuous improvement, testing out things, trying out things, and grounding themselves in data. And again, they've had a huge change with consistency, with a teaming structure that has just made this number, it's hard to look at on paper, like the growth that they've had. And so really proud of the work that they've done. And again, they focused hard. They had lots of people at the table. They had a vision of what success looked like, and they committed themselves to doing the work. And it was really fun to be a part of that journey with them.
I love that. Thank you. And this has been such a fun conversation. Before we wrap up, I have one final piece that I'd love from all three of you. What one piece of practical advice would you offer a district, a school, a peer partner that's eager to begin investing in leadership development?
Briefly, just find your champions. That's it. Find your champions.
I'll say don't wait. Right? Like, we know that the evidence is there, so don't wait. Get a strong team. And if the team is telling you that like there's one way to do it, I would say they're probably wrong, right? Like, they should be understanding you and your community first, and then working together to achieve success. So don't wait and do it.
I would share that leadership development is obviously about the leaders, but bring student voice in as much as possible. It can be hard, and it might take some really creative thinking, but when we're thinking about the issues that we want to improve in our schools, our students have a lot of ideas and they're very invested in their own success. So as much as possible, if we can build in opportunities for students to participate and be involved and share their opinions about how improvement efforts are going in their systems, I think it'll make your leadership development more successful.
Amazing. The piece of advice that I would offer and build on top of all of that is that small is all. So if all you can do is something small, then do it, and then build on it to come. So if you as an individual have the capacity, then that's what you should invest in this year, and then build on that. I think sometimes we get really caught up in what resources are or not available to us. And I would offer that there's always something small that can be done. And so thinking about what that small thing is that could be done that doesn't take a big budget or tons of time or tons of extra effort can really make a huge impact in the long run. So thinking about that. Thank you all for such a great conversation. I really, really appreciate the time. I'm sure we could go on for much longer, but we have promised our participants that we would be done by the top of the hour, so we will not do that. But huge gratitude, John, Justin, Rachel, for your time today and your expertise. I really, really appreciate it. We have had hundreds of education leaders participate in the One Goal Leadership Network, and the numbers show the great impact that this work has created in developing the skills and the impact that students need for post-secondary results. You see some on the slide today, but just to give you a sense of some of those things, our partners are reporting great impacts overall, and we're really, really proud of that. So that's it for today's webinar. Thank you everyone in the audience for joining us today. Oh, there's a quote we want to share. Sorry, Ina, we can go back. So an administrator from Allen County said, since starting with One Goal, post-secondary readiness in the district has likely improved through increased access to college preparatory resources, enhanced school support systems, and a stronger focus on individualized student pathways, resulting in higher college enrollment and success rates. And that's just one story, but there are many. We would welcome you to be partners with us if that's something that's interesting to you. With all of that, that's it for today's webinar. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Please follow One Goal on social media and visit our website to learn more about how we are working to transform post-secondary advising and support so that students can achieve their highest aspirations. Thanks again and have a great rest of your week.